moving on, our first speaker of the day is Šarūnas Nastys, the co-founder and COO of Serica. Šarūnas will be providing his insights on evaluating your China readiness and hopefully offering some tips and tricks as well. Šarūnas?
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the introduction. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Hear me all right?
Looks great.
Awesome. So hello and good morning to everyone here in the UK, and good afternoon to those who are tuning in from China. My name is Šarūnas Nastys, and I am the co-founder and COO at Serica. And it's a great pleasure for me today to take part in the summit and share the stage with such esteemed colleagues. So today I will be talking about assessing your China readiness, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will have a clear picture of what you should consider before engaging this lucrative market. Before we jump in, just a very quick introduction. So my work with China began around 15 years ago, and before transitioning into business, my original background was actually in sinology or China studies. Now, as COO at Serica, I oversee all of our strategy development work, and put simply, I help technology companies determine if and how they can be successful in China. So, what is market readiness? Well, market readiness, in simple terms, means knowing if your business can be successful, to what degree it can be successful, and actions you need to take to be successful in your target market. Embarking on a new market entry, especially if the market is radically different from your home market, can resemble starting a new business. It requires similar level of strategic thinking, hard work, and agility. And when it comes to starting a new business, this is the typical pattern. First, we have an idea, then we check if there's a market for it, and finally, we start working on defining our vision for success. Finally, if there's a good fit between what the market desires and the solutions that we offer, then provided we put in the diligent and consistent work, we can enjoy the fruits of success. Naturally, when entering new markets, some decision makers tend to follow the same principles. However, you already have an existing vision, solution, and a business model. So the relationship between these factors becomes inverted, and the questions you need to consider are somewhat more complex. So now we not only have to think about what our vision is, but also how the new market fits into it. And most importantly, can it bring us closer towards realizing our ambitions? Second, in addition to asking if there's a market for our products, we also need to know how the new market is different from what we already are used to. And finally, which of the original advantages can we leverage, and what do we need to adapt to be successful in our new environment? Now, getting this relationship wrong can lead to some serious oversight. For example, over-investing into excessive market research and localization efforts when there are simply easier markets to tap into, which could also bring you to those desired results. Or the opposite of that, companies to whom China is essential market for success, but that fail to recognize that and allocate inadequate resources. In both of these situations typically lead to poor end results. So to maximize our chances, we really need to have a clear end goal, understand the challenges, and know how we can overcome them. Once we do all that, then we can be ready to engage. So next, let's just dive deeper and explore these factors one by one. Starting off with the big picture. So how can China help you get closer to where you want to be? Over the past decade, the Chinese healthcare sector has undergone significant transformation and has become the fastest growing healthcare market in the world. And as you can see in the graph on the left, China is still far behind most developed economies in terms of per capita healthcare expenditure. However, despite being behind in per capita expenditure, it is already the second largest market globally by total healthcare spending. And it is also on track to become the leader in the sector. At its current growth trajectory of around 13% CAGR, China will overtake the US by 2032 and has the potential to become bigger than US and EU combined by sometime before 2050. So really what that tells us is that the future of global healthcare will be shaped by China, and most likely the future leader companies globally will be decided in China. So the importance of this market cannot be overlooked. Now, when evaluating China, it is also important not to get short-sighted by direct revenue potential and acknowledge all of the other strategic advantages it can offer. First off, scaling, right? China is an ideal place to scale tech solutions. Its unique size and agility enables innovators to expedite all the major steps from regulatory approval, market validation, all the way to IPO or an exit. Financing. China is the second biggest capital market, and those companies who focus their strategy around China or integrate China into it can effectively tap into this market as well. Manufacturing, no-brainer really. Although there's a lot of talk about diversifying your supply chains, the reality is such that no other market really can compete with China in terms of cost, skilled labor, manufacturing scale, and access to resources and components. And lastly, expansion. Once your products become competitive within the Chinese market, then you can leverage economies of scale and roll out the same products much more effectively in other developing markets as well. So even if you're not going to enter Chinese market with the goal of global leadership, realistically defining your goals can reveal numerous paths to success, of course, depending on your level of ambition. So for example, if your goal is to compete and consolidate your positions in your home market, then you can leverage China primarily as a market for sourcing solutions, supplies, and manufacturing products at a cost-effective rate, gaining some competitive advantages this way. If you're competing at a regional level, say Europe and North America, then maybe you can enter the market, but focus on gaining a small share of it through strategic partnerships, maybe tech licensing, or some other methods, basically to get an additional revenue to bolster your positions in other locations while avoiding excessive costs and direct competition with local players. And finally, if your long-term ambitions are global, then you simply have to engage with the market in full extent, both cooperating and competing with major local stakeholders. And naturally, this approach will require substantial commitment and resources. And once you have a clear picture of where China sits in your overall objectives, then you can decide the best way to engage with the market, the time and resources you're willing to invest to achieve your desired results. At the end of the day, if your primary ambition, for example, is to become a leading telemedicine provider for the UK market, then you don't really need to conduct extensive market research or evaluate the potential competitors in China. And that is completely fine. So now that you have determined what success looks like for your company and what is your desired level of engagement, you need to examine the market itself and understand the core differences from your home market. China is nothing like the West, like most of you probably already know. There are dozens of fundamental differences, big and small, but most of them can be effectively grouped into three major categories. So first, we have the systemic differences. For example, what is the regulatory environment, the procedures, what is the balance between public and private healthcare? Second, demographics. What is the unique demographic, social, and cultural makeup of China, and how will that affect your services and solutions? Now, most traditional market research does a decent job at covering the first two categories, but usually neglects the third one, which is business. So Chinese companies are different to their Western counterparts as they tend to form ecosystem clusters, sometimes formal, but often informal networks of partnerships and relationships that work in unison to support each other and repel outside competitors. Understanding how these ecosystems will react to your entry or where you could potentially fit into them to provide value is pertinent to success. So how can you gain insights into these areas? Well, of course, you need to do planning and do research. The problem is that China is notoriously difficult to gather accurate intelligence for. So first of all, it is opaque and fragmented. So even the best data paints only a partial picture. Then it's rapidly changing. So often rigid planning actually does more harm than good. Data gets obsolete quite quickly. And lastly, as mentioned, Chinese companies form intricate ecosystems. So standard business metrics often don't do justice to the different resources that some of these companies might have. Of course, there are tips and tricks that you can use to overcome these barriers. And I would just like to highlight a few of them. Now, the rest you maybe can follow up and read through on your own pace. So first, don't over-rely on data. Instead, focus on market trends to get a better understanding of the market and really the direction in which it is moving. Next, cross-reference multiple sources. Always do that really to minimize the risk of taking action based on the wrong perspectives. And finally, count only on the latest information and act very swiftly. Otherwise, really the information just gets obsolete in a year or two. Great. All right. So now that you know what success is for your company and you have a clear picture of the Chinese market, at least as much as you can, next you need to consider how your solutions will fit in the market. And the first step in this process really is to take a step back and objectively evaluate the factors that have led to your success originally. So in general, they're internal and external factors, both of which can act as either advantages or disadvantages. And external factors can be further divided into direct market or macro trends that follow the standard pestle model. In terms of internal, we have product-related factors such as value offered, quality, pricing, integrations, and execution-related factors. So that is your team, processes, company culture, and brand. In practice, what you really need to look at is how much of your success can be attributed to superior product versus outstanding execution, market timing, or favorable macro trends. In general, when it comes to new market entry, product-led companies typically have a higher chance for success, and it is much easier to transfer over your existing advantages. Whereas, for example, if your success is founded on a successful integration and leveraging of the NHS resources, then this advantage will not likely exist in other markets. So you will either have to find a substitute or change your business model entirely. So entering a new market, really, you need to understand which of your existing advantages can still be leveraged and which ones you will lose. Simultaneously, you also need to be conscious that your existing shortcomings in the home market will likely be amplified in the target market as well. Of course, this can be overcome by localization, and localization has to be done every time a business enters a new market. The complexity of it usually just depends on the proximity of the market, industry characteristics, and the types of solutions. So at the very basic level, it can be as simple as tailoring your market positioning and communication style to better resonate with local audiences and keeping compliant with legal and technical requirements. This is the usual case when entering similar markets, say UK to Germany. At a more complex level, it also includes product and branding localization. This, for example, could be the case if, say, a UK company would try to enter the Eastern European markets or the Balkans. Finally, at the highest level, you might be required to adapt your business model, organizational structures, and decision-making processes. And this is usually the case with China. Unfortunately, all too often, precisely this highest level localization is being neglected, effectively sabotaging all of these efforts downstream and resulting in costly mistakes. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but these general tips can help you guide you throughout the process. So don't overly rely on what brought success domestically. Again, identify your domestic advantages, try to leverage them, but localize your solutions for the new market. Provide a degree of regional strategic autonomy. To be effective in China, you will need to rely on your local team. Again, you cannot transfer over your existing team into the new market. So that autonomy is necessary there. Reduce bureaucracy and hasten approval mechanisms. Again, China moves very, very quickly. So you need to remove as many obstacles and burdens as reasonably possible. Prioritize experimentation and fast iteration over careful planning. This is a funny one, but I think maybe 10 years ago, maybe more, when I was working on a startup in China, we asked our investors at the time why Chinese companies don't seem to have long-term plans. And his reply actually surprised us, because what he said was, well, Chinese companies usually planned in the 90s, early 2000s, but the reality was such that those companies that tended to plan long-term were the ones that failed first, whereas the ones that rapidly iterated actually survived and became successful. So in China, a typical startup iteration model works best. Next, integrate and leverage existing local resources. Focus on win-win cooperation over winner-takes-all competitions. So again, think about how you can integrate into local ecosystems. Think about how you can create value for other participants in the market, and optimize your organizational structure for speed and agility. And now that you have a clear picture of what you want to achieve in the market, how you fit inside of it, and have an understanding of the inevitable changes you will need to make to find success, you can consider yourself ready to enter the Chinese market, or at least engage with it. So thank you all for attention, and I look forward to answering any of the questions.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Šarūnas. Excellent. Cool. So I think got a couple of questions here, some interesting ones. The first one I have is what's the biggest mistake you see when companies are trying to localize?
One of the common mistakes that we come across really is the local leadership typically understands the reasons to localize. They understand the logic, they understand the necessity. But what often happens is the global leadership or the C-level doesn't really get bought into it, and they tend to overprotect is a strong word, but they tend to protect the global brand and the global operational model as much as possible. And typically these two models are not very compatible. And unless the global leadership relinquishes some of that control and gives the local team the flexibility that they need to act, that can just result in a lot of clashes, a lot of mistakes, and just hamstring the progress of the local company, local
Yeah,
subsidiary.
yeah, makes sense. I think ties well back into what you were saying about being reactive and not too beholden to what brought you success abroad.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, another one here. So for small companies with limited resources, is it still possible to engage with the market effectively?
Yes. Of course, of course. Uh, Again, depending on the type of company and the solution you have, for example, if your solutions are innovative, if they can create value in the local market to local ecosystem players, you can leverage the existing resources, the partnerships in that market, and interest in your solution to boost your growth. So uh, effectively just boosting your existing resources by effective partnerships and alliances in the market.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, so getting some of the resources of a bigger company while maintaining your
Exactly.
flexibility. Nice.
Piggybacking in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, lovely. Thank you so much, Šarūnas. Really appreciate you sharing with us.
No worries. Happy to be here.